Okay, so of course we should say today that we should make a tefillah to Hashem. We should make a prayer to Hashem that He grants everybody peace and healing, and everybody should have what they need in life without any need to fight anybody else for it. The learning of the Likutei Moharan, we've had a little bit of we've had a little bit of time between this lesson and the last lesson for a good reason. It was the Yom Naraim, the high holidays. I hope everybody is off to a start with a good, sweet year. So I'm going to make a little bit of a review, and then we'll move forward with a new concept. And because we've had a little bit of a lapse, I won't dwell too much on what we've discussed. I feel they're here. So, okay. So the general theme that we've discussed thus far is the idea that the likes and dislikes, but the primary focus of the teaching is on the likes of the world, what people like, is in a little bit of a fallen state. Maybe we could say that not everything that everybody likes is that worthy of liking. Maybe some things that some people like. I bet I could think of one thing I like that's a little bit shallow and doesn't really have that much substance or real benefit to me. So, a very simple way of improving the world would be if us and those around us, and maybe if we happen to have a wide sphere of influence, everybody that we influence, just had a little better criteria for what they like, what's important to them. And so the word that Rabbeinu Zal, that Rabbi Nachman uses here to describe likiness, things that we like, is chen, the Hebrew word chen. And so practically, how do we do that? How do we improve our ability to know what to like and the temptation of people around us, what they're going to like? How do we make it to be better, higher quality, more helpful things, especially not harmful things? So this is a sort of a Kabbalistic teaching of Rabbi Nachman where we dissect the Hebrew word. It says in many sources in the Torah, it's often said in the name of the Zohar that the world is made out of the Hebrew letters, sort of like how a computer code is written with, ones and zeros, or maybe there's some more sophisticated codes out there, the ones and zeros, but essentially the universe, the phenomenal universe is programmed in a similar way, using the Hebrew letters. So if we want to learn about something, we can do so by studying the Hebrew letters that comprise its name. So the Hebrew word chen is a 2-letter word. By the way, at the beginning of the lesson, Rabbi Nachman quotes a verse from the songs of David HaMelech, King David, which says, Ashrei tamimi darech hahoylechim v'toras Hashem. Happy are those that walk in the Torah of Hashem. I saw it in a pamphlet that brought together teachings from one of the great leaders of Breslov, who founded in a very big way the Sfat Breslov community, Reb Gedalia Aharon Koenigzal. He said in there that one is to emphasize the word hoylechim when they read this, the word walking, because there is an alternation of. There's many times in Teres Breslov where we learn about there being sort of 2 things that we alternate between. And there's an idea that there's 2 Yetzer Haras. Not 3, but also not 1, 2. So it's one of the secrets of this famous Breslov statement that the world is a narrow bridge, or man has to cross a narrow bridge. Well, how many sides are there to a bridge? There's 2 sides. So there's 2 things, basically, we have to deal with in nearly any aspect of life, anything that the Likutei Moharan addresses, which is a large body of situations. So chen, the Hebrew word for likability, this thing that we're trying to improve in ourselves and others and the whole world with Hashem's help, is a 2-letter word. The first letter, ches, Rabbi Nachman says it stands for chachma, which maybe we can translate here as appreciability. Just the fact that everything around us is made in an intelligent way, and nothing is actually simple. If I look at a rock, I think it's simple, but if I look at it under a microscope, I take a closer look, I gather more information. It's not so simple, actually. Nothing around us is particularly simple. There is value in simplicity, but as a personal trait. But the things around us have a lot of information in them. Hashem imbued everything with a lot of information. And so there's many things for us to appreciate about any given situation. And many of the times when people struggle in a situation, if they only understood better the situation, they could have a better time in the situation. They would determine better what to like and dislike about the situation if they understood the situation better. I don't want to beleaguer us with too many examples because we've discussed this matter before and I'm doing a review, but I'll give one. It's not a personal example or anything. The personal examples we'll have to find in our own lives, but it examples the concept well, I think. A guy moves to a new town and he discovers that the local stores did not carry his favorite candy bar. Oh no, this sounds like, if he were to jump to a judgment without analyzing the situation first, he might determine that this is a slightly bad situation and be somewhat, obviously he's not going to be extremely upset about it, but Rabbi Nachman says that this technique lights all ways in our lives, the easy ones and the hard ones. So we can start with easy situations and train ourselves with light weights before we move on to dealing with the big situations in life. So something like I moved to a new town and they don't have the candy bar that I like at the store. So, or the guy could also view it as, there's an opportunity. Everybody would like this candy bar if only they tried it. Maybe I could establish some sort of supply line. Now, someone who is superficially looking at the information of the situation might have that idea, then determine that it's too much work and he's not actually going to do it. Okay. So, but maybe if he took another look at, how could I actually establish, if it's too much work, maybe if I understood the situation better, it wouldn't actually be so much work to do. And maybe this guy could actually succeed in setting up some sort of a deal, brokering some sort of a deal with the candy bar company in the stores. And now, not only the store has his favorite candy bar, but also he has this new source of income that he doesn't work very hard for. So actually, the fact that the fact that his candy bar was not in the city was a good thing for him in his life because he looked into the information in this. Now, this is not to say that the lesson here is not look at everything as though it's positive. We're not saying the guy just saw that the candy bar is not there and then he makes up silver lining about it and says, well, I guess that means I won't, I'll have better teeth or something like that, and make some positive spin, because that also is judging right away. I could take a situation that's frustrating when a traffic jam and I could say, this is bad. Or I could say, well, this is actually good because I'm supposed to do that. But I haven't actually done the work that Rabbi Nachman is saying if I do that. Rabbi Nachman is telling us we have to look at gather more information about the situation. Look, appreciate some details before determining good or bad. You can still determine good or bad after. And we have to in most situations in life. Determine if we want to increase or decrease the existence of something. But the first teaching here about improving the likes of the world is about gathering information, informing our emotional decisions. Okay, but so there's another aspect to it. This is only a mental process that has been described and not an emotional process. And if we think something in our head, but we aren't convinced of it in our heart, we're probably not going to do it. So Rabbi Nachman tells us about the emotional aspect of this, which is the second letter in the word chen, word for likability, which is the letter nun. And he takes us through a little bit of an exploration of some theme tracing. He does like a little bit of a drasha here. I won't go too into the details of it, but essentially what nun represents, the letter nun, is it represents a clearing of our hearts so that there's room for this information, a clearing of our preconceived judgments, and before we try to show what we think about the situation and we try to be a big shiny light, well, we have to make the space to receive the information that Hashem has put in the situation for us to connect with and to utilize and to benefit from and to benefit others from. One thing that nun is compared to, the letter nun is compared to the moon. And it's known that the moon does not make any light. The moon gets all of its light from the sun, and it reflects the light of the sun. And it's actually sort of amazing that this thing that's such like a relatively incalculable distance from us as far as what we do in our day-to-day lives. I mean, a scientist could give you a measurement, but it's not a number I relate to that many miles, that I can see this thing In Sfat, you can see it in the day. It's just where we are on the planet or something. You can see this big bright ball in the sky, and that's the moon. And it doesn't make any light. So we don't have to worry that if I don't judge things initially in a situation, I'm not going to have my voice heard. No, the moon is a shining example, literally, that isn't the case. If we receive the information in the situation, we will be heard in a better way, a more beneficial way, a more positive way, a more informed way. Okay, so that is a brief review of some of the themes that we've discussed, and the reason I'm focusing on the spelling of the word hein is because we're going to move on to another word that is formed by adding another letter to the word hein.
So, what does this have to do with the two types of Yetzer Hara?
That was just an example of how in Teres Breslov in general, the idea that there's two of many things. Mm-hmm. We don't have to deal with three, but we also don't have to deal only with one. The two Yetzer Haras thing, a person could think there's only one Yetzer Hara. It says that there's a Yetzer Hara that wants to kill a guy. But then he's going to run away from that one, far away from that one, and he'll find the other one that wants to make him crazy.
And what was the comparison between the sun and the moon earlier on when you mentioned this?
The sun and the moon is talking about the concept of noon, the second aspect of what we need to improve the likes in the world, that we need to have this clearing of our pre-existent information, our preconceptions about a situation before we're really fit to receive new current information.
What's the role of the sun in that clearing?
The sun represents in that concept the intelligence that Hashem put in everything.
But isn't that part of the chokhmah?
Yeah.
The sun was the chokhmah.
Yeah, the fact that there's so much infinite information within everything around me. So if I'm making an uninformed decision or an uninformed emotional decision, it's because I'm not paying attention very well. It's not that the information has not been provided to me. It's there. There's a lot of information, all things. One other concept about this, because I think this is an important thing to say, balance is very important in Breslov, not too much, not too little. Rabbi Nachman says that the sun, the information overload that's in everything around us, is a very great light. It is very great. And so if a guy can trip out on it, a guy can have too much of it. Someone can start gathering information and then just sit there all day and gather information and never end because it's infinite. You can never end gathering information. My teacher gave an example of this, that he said he went out to the woods with a microscope.
Yeah.
And he sees there's a little square of dirt, and with your bare eye you can see some basic things about the dirt, but it's not ultimately that interesting to look at with you. But then you look at it with a microscope, there's a whole other forest in there.
So what is the difference between the chokhmah, the information from the sun,
right,
and the information that we receive as a reflection from the moon?
Well, we're the moon. What we want to do in this situation is be the moon. Before we talk about the third letter, what the first two letters hein give us is the ability to be the moon, to reflect accurate information about a current situation. The two reasons that we don't already do that is because, one, we don't necessarily pay so much attention to our environment that we usually jump to a decision and then gather information filtered through whether we like or don't like it. Right. So that's the first step, is the sun part. The fact that the sun, but then we have to be the moon properly, which means that we have to clear away our preconceived notions, because that information is from 10 minutes ago. Everything could be completely different now. So just because I paid attention 10 minutes ago doesn't give me an excuse not to pay attention now, or doesn't give me an excuse to think, oh, well, I already know the information, I'm just going to use the information I got from before. There's to always be in a modality of receiving information from the situation, and that involves letting go of our preconceived notions. So that's the moon. And then we shine.
But he's suggesting that the information from the moon, the reflected information from the moon, is more valuable than the raw information from the sun. Is that right?
No, the raw information from the sun it's just that you need a proper vessel to receive it. So we are supposed to be that vessel for ourselves and for others by clearing away our preconceived notions and paying attention.
So ultimately, the reflection of this moon The light from the reflection is what we're trying to achieve.
Right.
The distilled reflection of the
It's
information.
actually sunlight. It's not like I'm shining the sun in a flashlight or something, and actually you're getting a little bit of like sort of fake light. When I say fake light, there's some halachas where we need to have light to determine them. There's a concept of real light. We have to look at something under real light, which means sunlight, not a flashlight. There have been some people who have tried to get rabbinically approved flashlights that emulate sunlight, but it's not the best choice. This is the actual real sun. That's called real light. So the difference between the moon and a flashlight is that the moon, it's actually the sunlight. The flashlight, you have to go through many, many contractions to get the light from the sun. It gives life to Earth. Then humans are able to arise and extract minerals from the ground and eventually turn it into a battery. It is sort of sunlight very long time ago, but it's been very, very modified.
We also have to kind of be clear now as well that this is not actually talking about sunlight and moonlight. These are mashalim.
Yeah, it's right, but it's right. It's an accurate mashal. So we have to understand the mashal. Of course, it should be said that all of this we're always talking about concepts and godliness, but we're talking about it in terms of physical things we can relate to, because that's sort of the concept of being the moon. Is that we channel it in a way that is relatable, and it's not just like you don't just get zonked on it. It's a piece of information you can take home, you can use. So the moonlight is actually the sunlight with very little contraction, just enough contraction that you can perceive it, and it's not blinding to look at the moon. So too, a person who clears themselves of preconceived notions and pays attention to the situations around them, this person reflects the godliness, reflects the information that Hashem put in everything in a more accurate way than someone who doesn't do that. So then, sounds nice for me, but what effect is this going to have on anybody else? If just because I act like that, or the dear reader acts like this. So now we're going to go on to the next one. So Zeh Bechinas Tzav.
Where are you in the draft?
Actually, you know what? I'm not sure if your page is formatted. I don't know if I made enough copies. Let me see. Yeah.
No,
It's not in there. Sorry, I need to make more copies. Or maybe
Okay,
if there's a Likutei Moharan around here. I saw one in that corner, but it's not a new Likutei, so it'll be it's an old school book. Okay. So we're going to add a third letter to the word now. We've taken the word chayin, likability. We've received instruction how to sort of increase the quality of the things that we like, the quality of our emotional decisions. Now we're going to add another letter to the word. So if we add the letter sav to the end of the word, meaning that we have successfully established chayin, we've successfully established in ourselves informed emotional decisions, and that we like things that are truly worthy of like. There's information behind our likes, unbiased information behind our likes. Then it automatically creates sort of a third thing, which is this principle of sav. Now the letter sav, or tav, it represents a carving. A carving. I'll speak English mostly here. A carving, an inscription. Writing in a way that is not simply ink added on top of paper, which is not really the substance of the paper. You could erase ink that's written on it, but it actually goes into the material itself. The verse that indicates such a thing says that there's going to be a tav, a marker that is carved into stone. There will be something very memorable about the experience of talking to someone who has increased the quality of their emotional decisions. This is the emergent factor of when we do this internal work. In a way that, if you can compare it this way, like if I have a stone thing and I paint certain things on it, right? So most of my interactions throughout the day that I may or may not remember all that well, they're sort of like I painted onto the stone. It could get washed away. It's not, it didn't change the nature of the stone in any way. But when I interact with someone who's done this sort of internal work, it sticks in me as though it like made its own space within me, like as though I sort of carved through the rock. And this is not something that I'll forget.
Chiseled, engraved.
Yeah, chiseled and engraved, right. Removing material in order to create the writing, create the form, the shape of the letters. So because when we talk to someone, I guess it makes a space within them so that they can receive our requests. So one of the things that Rabbi Nachman says at the beginning of this lesson is that by following the instructions that he teaches in this lesson, that all of our prayers and requests will be received. Now, we've talked a little bit about our prayers being received already. In that, if we increase the quality of what we want based on the real information around us and not based on pre-existent information, we will find that what we want is actually already there in the situation. We approach it by two directions. One is that we're actually looking at the real situation and seeing possibilities we didn't see before, like the guy who goes to the town with the candy bars and he makes a business out of it. So that's one side of it. But the other side of it is that we actually increase the quality of what we want so that it isn't something that is random or not related to reality or something. That's if I desire something that isn't related to my reality so much, it's not going to help me that much if I get it. If I desire something that is more relevant to the real situations that I encounter in my life, it's like when you give a little kid a present. It's like, is it a better present if you give him cookies or if you give him a nice jacket? They might think it's cookies because they're a little kid. But as an adult, we should know that no, actually a nice jacket, is assuming they live in a place that it makes sense to buy them a jacket, is actually a much, much better gift. It relates with many more situations in their life. And so we can use that analogy on ourselves maybe. I should be like the little kid who's like, oh yeah, jacket. I live in a cold place. This is a great gift. Right? But the instinct is to want the cookies. Okay. So that's the idea of our prayers being answered. Now, requests is a sort of more concrete thing. When I go to the bank teller and I tell them I need to do some certain process, it's not necessarily like in the way of a prayer where what I want is maybe going to change and improve as I emotionally develop. No, it's a lot more of a locked-in, verifiable thing, a request, when I'm talking to another human being. I typically know what I need, whether or not I want it. I need this government document or whatever it is. But one of the effects is that when we have an elevated emotional standing, then it makes us memorable, one. But two, people have a space within them to receive our requests. If a memorable person asks me for something, I'm going to remember the person and what they asked me for. Whereas somebody who hasn't done this work that makes them automatically more memorable, if they ask me something, I might very well want to fulfill, but I just forget. It just doesn't, it sticks to the surface. Then I get busy with other things in my day. It's the metaphor of the Mayim Rabim, the great waters that we have to deal with in our day-to-day life. And it just sort of washes away the request that they're a nice person, I would like to help them. But the person who has this ability to create a space in other people, their requests are not so easily forgotten.
Their requests are not what?
So are not easily forgotten. I'll make just a brief review here. We're saying that someone who has succeeded in the work that Rabbi Nachman explains of elevating their sense of what they like and what they don't like, and informing those emotional decisions that they make, sort of their reward from Shemayim for this effort. The emergent factor of this work is that they will become a more memorable person. The metaphor is they're more like someone who is, their requests are sort of like carved into the hearts of those they request from, not written on the surface that they can easily wash away. And so that's why Shlomo HaMelech, King Shlomo, says that the words of the wise are heard with ease, with nachas. Now it seems like a little bit different of a message here. Nachas Nachas is like it's comfortable when they speak to me. That doesn't necessarily sound like something that I would seemingly I would remember something uncomfortable more than I would remember something comfortable. But we, as is the premise of this lesson, unfortunately the case in the world right now, or maybe to say the opportunity we have to uplift it, is that the likes and dislikes of the world are fallen. And therefore, in order for something to be memorable, many times it has to require some sort of discomfort. There has to be some negativity in it for it to stick to me enough. I'll give you a metaphor for this one. There's a very great rabbi in Israel right now, Shlomo Yehuda Be'iri Hayinuka. I mean, it's like the child genius. And one of the things about him is his memory. He can speak for 5 minutes and then give you a citation. What he just read you 10 pages of a book off the top of his head. Right. So I saw an interview with him where they asked, well, how do you do it, man? And he said, well, as in his childhood, he had to travel around a lot and he wasn't so settled, but he happened to have some books of the lives of sages. And one thing he noticed early on in his life is that when you have a negative experience, you can't forget it. It's hard to forget a negative experience. Why would that be? Because it's close to your heart. You felt it a lot. And so not only you don't have to try so hard to remember it, but it's actually hard to forget. Halavai, the Torah that we learned, would be hard to forget. It's hard to remember, I think, for me anyway. At my spiritual level, I have to make an effort to remember the things that I learned. But wouldn't it be amazing if it was literally hard to forget, if it just stuck to my heart right away? Stuff in our mind. The mind is wishy-washy. The wind blows and the mind goes over here and over there. The heart's, it's a rock in my chest. It's not like that. Stuff that goes in the heart doesn't leave so easily. If it makes it in. And that's what Rabbi Nachman is teaching us here about this emergent process of someone who's elevated their emotional decisions, that the things they say make it into the heart. So this great rabbi with the incredible memory, using this information that negative experiences are hard to forget, he would read these biographies of sages, and then he would meditate on their lives and cry about their lives. Get to a point that he was so emotionally connected with the story that the potent experiences they had, he would cry about. Not because anything bad actually happened to him. No discomfort really is needed for this. He's in a learning setting. This is a calm environment, and he doesn't have to suffer in order to do this. But then, once he's done that, he can read their sefer and instantly remembers everything that they ever said. How could he forget? He had such an intense experience with this person who wrote this book, so he remembers everything they say. So this is the idea of the things that make their way into the heart are not so easily forgotten. But why should we need to have a negative experience to remember the things that are important and to remember people's requests? And so this speaks to the elevation of the world, that the words of the wise are received with comfort, that we should be able to receive people's requests and remember important things in a comfortable way. And so this is a person that has elevated their emotional decisions that they make. Their words will be received in a memorable way without this pain. So this way we de-necessitate the suffering in the world. Or at least one of the reasons that there's suffering in the world is seemingly so that we have sufficient intensity that we can actually remember and relate with anything. But we won't need that reason anymore if we elevate our likes. Okay, so then Rabbi Nachman talks a little bit more about this concept, this new word, this form, this word nachas, that means comfort. This is the same letters that we've discussed, but with this new faculty of the ches representing that there's so much information just in the world all around us. In every little thing, there's so much information that can help us if we pay attention to it. And the nun, that if we clear our preconceived notions and receive this information, we really could become a pillar of truth. And the tav, which represents that then people remember what we say and remember our requests and think of us and without having to get in their face about it and be like intense and bring any negativity into the situation.
Is there any relevance to the fact that you've changed the order of the letters?
He doesn't say here. Yeah, I'm sure there is. there's something to say about that. We're at the end of a paragraph, so it's a really good question. And to answer the question, we can talk a little bit about the method of learning Likutei Moharan. So there is a book that lists 18 rules of deriving out information from the Likutei Moharan. And it is a very easy book to drown in. To drown in. What I mean by that is one of the rules is, so let's say a lesson has 10 like bullet points, right? Has Aleph, Beis, Gimel. So then you have to learn, well, Aleph and Beis. What if I just learn, what if that's the whole lesson? What does it mean to me? Now switch the order. What if Beis came first? Okay, now do Aleph and Gimel. Aleph and Dalet. Now Aleph, Beis, Gimel. Aleph, Gimel, Beis. So that's like infinite. Like what's how many times are you going to have to learn the lesson that way? So one should appreciate about the Likutei Moharan that Rabbi Nachman intended that. He gave specific lessons that will be learned out from every sort of which way, every permutation that you could learn each of these lessons from. That being said, the method that I generally follow for actually doing the practical, I tried that. I didn't make it very far. It's like easy to go nuts that way. It says, we talk about going out in the woods and praying to Hashem by yourselves in Breslov a lot. It says in Likutei Moharan, I think, that you can go crazy doing that. So look, it's an outlook of balance. So I found a writing of Reb Gedalia Aharon Zal, who founded the Sfat Breslov community. He says there that really what you should do is you read the Likutei Moharan in a nice voice with a calm pace and tone, and then you read the Kitzur Likutei Moharan the same way.
The what?
The Kitzur Likutei Moharan. It's sort of a reformatting by Reb Nosson Zal, who was the primary disciple of Rabbi Nachman. And then you read the prayer that Reb Nosson Zal wrote based on Likutei Moharan. Read Likutei Moharan one more time, and go to the next one. You should not sit there and try to pick apart every little word, but you should know that all the possibilities of word orders and letter orders, Rabbi Nachman put intention into those. So it should, so that information, so yes, you're absolutely right. The fact that the order of letters is switched is absolutely part of the lesson. But it's not something that I'm smart enough to relate to. Unless I could find some writing that explains it from a very reputable source, I wouldn't. If I were to sit there and try to make some lesson out of that, I'd be sort of making up my own stuff, right?
But has none of the Hasidim and Tzaddikim
There are books. There are books.
who have looked at it and tried to understand why.
On that point, I haven't found anything. Yes, there are things like that. Like the thing I told you about the two Yetzer Haras, that's from Be'er Likutim, which is where he goes through and he finds interesting things, and some of them he explains. And some of them he says, I don't know how to explain it, but you should appreciate it. It's cool. There's this thing I noticed. But what we should take account for is that this makes this a really Gavaldic book. It's a really intense book. We can read it in a non-intense way, but there is the infinite in this book. Every combination of letters, so that's one that stood out to us, right? Because it's clear that the letter orders are switched. But you could go through the whole book and just pick about, well, what if you rearrange this sentence and you read it, and you could do that and find interesting things like that with nearly every sentence in the book. And Rabbi Nachman intentionally engraved lessons into all those things. That's beyond the scope of most of us. If we find it in the book by one of the great Hasidim, that could be legit. We could spend a little bit of time doing that kind of thing as an exercise, but the primary purpose of that information is to just really appreciate how awesome of a thing that you're holding in your hands when you have Likutei Moharan, and then read it with that, informed by that feeling of the awesomeness. Okay. So now we're going to see an example of this from the Chumash, where we talked about Yaakov before, who did the impossible when he acquired the firstborn rights from his older brother, which he needed to do basically to save the world. Welcome. And Yaakov is one thing that's great about Yaakov is that he pays attention to the intelligence in all the things around him. He takes in the information. And he even says at one point explicitly that Hashem has given me chen. Hashem has given me likability. Why? Because where does Yaakov's ability to have these to be so effective in these interpersonal communications come from? It comes from God. As we had someone say earlier, we're not literally talking about the son here, like that's the end goal here. We're actually talking about God. And, right. So Yaakov Avinu connects this whole thing. It's not just like a self-help thing. He connects this whole thing back to Hashem. When he says that this chen everybody likes about me, well, I got it from Hashem. Because if the world was not so jam-packed with information, I couldn't do any of this stuff that Rabbi Nachman's saying. So it's only because Hashem put the information there that I have it to work with. Okay, and Yaakov also then blessed his children. He says, "Hayaladim asher chunan," that he also wishes for his children, all the tribes of Israel, that they should all, because Israel, that's his name, is Israel. It's Yaakov, his other name is Israel. So he wishes, he blesses all the tribes. They should all have this quality too. Now, at the point that he gave those brachas, one of his sons, Binyamin, was not there. And so he made another statement here that Hashem should give should give chen to my son, meaning the son that is not even present yet, because this is something that is going to be constantly refreshing. We touched on this concept a little bit before when we talked about the concept of letter nun in the word chen, that it represents like sort of a clearing of my preconceived notions. But why should I have to clear my preconceived notions? I happen to think they're rather good. They do help me in life. What exactly is the problem? If you just want to tell me it as sort of a rebuke, like you're telling me something that should be a good personal quality, I can sort of take or not take that one. But you didn't prove it to me that there's any real problem. You said there's some benefit in doing this exercise of clearing my preconceived notions. But you never said what the problem with preconceived notions itself is. Well, reality is constantly changing. So the information that was true before is not necessarily true now, and more important than that, the information that's here now, and I have to know this going forward, that even the information I'm gathering now, I shouldn't take this like this is the ultimate end thing here, right? It's from Hashem, it's from this eternal being. So later on, there's also going to be new, fresh information. So we have an intention at the time of the gathering the information that I know that I'm gathering finite information, and in this way I'm relating with the infinite, but I should be relating with the infinite. And if so, later it's going to change, and I'll need new finite information. And all the time I should keep these doors open to acquiring information before judging. And this is why Yaakov, he blesses even a son that he didn't yet have, that he should have this quality of chen.
What do you mean he blessed the son he didn't have?
He brings here, I think it's based on a midrash, that at the time that Yaakov gave the blessings to the Shvatim, that he said that to his sons, that would be the leaders of the tribes, Ki chanani elikim, that hayaladim asher chunan, the children that are given chen, are given this improved likability and improved likes,